podcast designed to help you fall asleep. Find us on snoozecast.com and follow us on Instagram @snoozecast to find behind-the-scenes content. If you enjoy our show, please write a review on the Apple Podcasts app. Here's a recent review we loved. The subject line is, "An island of calm and comfort." It goes, "When I awaken in the middle of the night with the daily worries of life whirling through my brain, your stories guide me to a calm and comforting space. I love the nostalgia of revisiting books I enjoyed as a child. I appreciate the limited ads and the way you taper down at the end of the story. Thank you so much for helping so many people like me." And thank you to the dear listener who wrote this review. We're so happy to help you fall asleep. This episode is brought to you by our Patreon supporters and by The Giant's Stairway. Tonight, we'll read the next part to our Magic Cloak series from the book Queen Zixi of Ix, or The Story of the Magic Cloak, a children's book written by L. Frank Baum and published in 1905. If you'd like to listen to this continuing story easily in order, go to snoozecast.com/series. In the last episode, the war between the kingdoms of Noland and Ix ends with the Ixian army running away in fear of Nole's magical powers. Queen Zixi devises a new plan to steal the magic cloak. She disguises herself as a girl and asks to become a royal maid of Princess Fluff. Let's get cozy. Close your eyes. Relax your body into the softness of your bed. Now, take a few deep breaths. "Who are you?" asked Princess Fluff. "I am daughter of the Lord Hurrydole, and my name is Atlena," replied the girl, which was not altogether a falsehood, because one of her ancestors had borne the name Hurrydole, and Atlena was one of her own names. "Then, Atlena," said Fluff brightly, "you shall certainly be one of my maids, for there is plenty of room in the palace, and the more girls I have around me, the happier I shall be." So, Queen Zixi, under the name of Atlena, became an inmate of the king's palace, and it was not many days before she learned where the magic cloak was kept. For the princess gave her a key to the drawer and told her to get from it a blue silk scarf she wished to wear. And directly under the scarf lay the fairy garment. Atlena would have seized it at that moment had she dared, but Fluff was in the same room, so she only said, "Please, Princess, may I look at that pretty cloak?" "Of course," answered Fluff, "but handle it carefully, for it was given to me by fairies." So Atlena unfolded the cloak and looked at it very carefully, noting exactly the manner in which it was woven. Then She folded it again, arranged it in the drawer, and turned the key, which the princess immediately attached to a chain which she always wore around her neck. That night, when the witch queen was safely locked in her own room and could not be disturbed, she called about her a great many of those invisible imps that serve the most skillful witches, commanding them to weave for her a cloak in the exact likeness of the one given Princess Fluff by the fairies. Of course, the imps had never seen the magic cloak, but Zixi described it to them accurately, and before morning they had woven a garment so closely resembling the original that the imitation was likely to deceive anyone. Only one thing was missing, and that was the golden thread woven by Queen Lulea herself, and which gave the cloak its magic powers. Of course, the imps of Zixi could not get this golden thread, nor could they give any magical properties to the garment they had made at the witch's command. But they managed to give the cloak all of the many brilliant colors of the original, and Zixi was quite satisfied. The next day, Adlena wore this cloak while she walked in the garden. Very soon, Princess Fluff saw her and ran after the girl, crying indignantly, "See here, what do you mean by wearing my cloak? Take it off instantly." "It isn't your cloak. It is one of mine," replied the girl, calmly. "Nonsense. There can't be two such cloaks in the world," retorted Fluff. "But there are. How could I get at the one in your drawer when the key is around your own neck?" "I'm not sure. I don't know," admitted the princess, beginning to be puzzled. "But come with me into my rooms. If my fairy cloak is indeed in the drawer, then I will believe you." So they went to the drawer, and of course found the magic cloak as the cunning Zixi had planned. Fluff pulled it out and held the two up together to compare them, and they seemed to be exactly alike. "I think yours is a little longer," said Adlena, and threw it over the shoulders of the princess. "No, I think mine is the longer," she continued, and, removing the cloak, the magic one, put her own upon Fluff. They seemed to be about the same length, but Adlena kept putting first one and then the other upon the princess until they were completely mixed, and the child could not have told one from the other. "Which is mine?" she finally asked in a startled voice. "This, of course," answered Adlena, folding up the imitation cloak which the imps had made and putting it away in the drawer. Fluff never suspected the trick, so Zixi carried away the magic cloak she had thus cleverly stolen. And she was so delighted with the success of her strategy that she could have screamed aloud for pure joy. As soon as she was alone and unobserved, the Witch Queen slipped out of the palace and, carrying the magic cloak in a bundle under her arm, ran down the streets of Nole and out through the gate in the wall and away toward the mountain where the lilac grove lay. At last, she kept saying to herself, at last I shall see my own beautiful reflection in the mirror instead of that horrid old hag. When she was safe in the grove, she succeeded, by means of her witchcraft, in transforming the girl Adlena back into the beautiful woman known throughout the kingdom of Ix as Queen Zixi. And then she lost no time in throwing the magic cloak over her shoulders. I wish, she cried in a loud voice, that my reflection in every mirror will hereafter show the same face and form as that in which I appear to exist in the sight of all mortals. Then she threw off the cloak and ran to the crystal spring, saying, now indeed I shall at last see the lovely Queen Zixi. But as she bent over the spring, she gave a sudden shriek of disappointed rage, for, glaring up at her from the glassy surface of the water, was the same fearful hag she had always seen as the reflection of her likeness. The magic cloak would grant no person a wish who had stolen it. Zixi, more wretched than she had ever been before in her life, threw herself down upon her face in the lilac grove and wept for more than an hour, which is an exceedingly long time for tears to run from one's own eyes. And when she finally arose, 2 tiny brooks flowed from the spot and wound through the lilac trees, one to the right and one to the left. Then, leaving the magic cloak, to possess which she had struggled so hard and sinfully, lying unheeded upon the ground, the disappointed witch queen walked slowly away and finally reached the bank of the great river. Here she found a rugged old alligator who lay upon the bank, weeping with such bitterness that the sight reminded Zixi of her own recent outburst of sorrow. "Why do you weep, friend?" she asked. Her experience as a witch had long since taught her the language of the beasts and birds and reptiles. "Because I cannot climb a tree," answered the alligator. "But why do you wish to climb a tree?" she questioned, surprised. "Because I can't," returned the alligator, squeezing 2 more tears from his eyes. "But that is very foolish," exclaimed the witch queen scornfully. "Oh, I don't know," said the alligator. "It doesn't strike me that it's much more foolish than the fancies some other people have." "Perhaps not," replied Zixi, more gently, and walked away in deep thought. While she followed the river bank to find a ferry across, the dusk fell, and presently a gray owl came out of a hollow in a tall tree and sat upon a limb, wailing dismally. Zixi stopped and looked at the bird. "Why do you wail so loudly?" she asked. "Because I cannot swim in the river like a fish," answered the owl, and it screeched so sadly that it made the queen shiver. "Why do you wish to swim?" she inquired. "Because I can't," said the owl, and buried its head under its wing with a groan. "But that is absurd," cried Zixi with impatience. The owl had an ear out and heard her, so it withdrew its head long enough to retort. "I don't think it's any more absurd than the longings of some other folks." "Perhaps you are right," said the queen, and hung her head as she walked on. By and by, she found a ferryman with a boat, and he agreed to row her across the river. In one end of the boat crouched a little girl, the ferryman's daughter, and she sobbed continually, so that the sound of the child's grief finally attracted Zixi's attention. "Why do you sob?" questioned the queen. "Because I want to be a man," replied the child, trying to stifle her sobs. "Why do you want to be a man?" asked Zixi, curiously. "Because I'm a little girl," was the reply. This made Zixi angry. "You're a little fool," she exclaimed loudly. "Well, there are other fools in the world," said the child, and renewed her sobs. Zixi did not reply, but she thought to herself, "We are all alike. The alligator, the owl, the girl, and the powerful Queen of Ix. We long for what we cannot have, yet desire it not so much because it would benefit us as because it is beyond our reach. If I call the others fools, I must also call myself a fool for wishing to see the reflection of a beautiful girl in my mirror when I know it is impossible. So hereafter I shall strive to be contented with my lot. This was a wise resolution, and the witch queen abided by it for many years. She was not very bad, this Zixi, for it must be admitted that few have the courage to acknowledge their faults and strive to correct them, as she did. Chapter 16. The Plain Above the Clouds. I have already mentioned how high the mountains were between Noland and the land of Ix. But at the north of the city of Nole were mountains much higher. So high, indeed, that they seemed to pierce the clouds, and it was said the moon often stopped on the highest peak to rest. It was not one single slope up from the lowlands, but first there was a high mountain with a level plain at the top, and then another mountain higher, rising from the level, and capped with a second plain, and then another mountain, and so on, which made them somewhat resemble a pair of stairs, so that the people of Nole, who looked upon the North Mountains with much pride, used to point them out as the giant's stairway, forgetting that no giant was ever big enough to use such an immense flight of stairs. Many people had climbed the first mountain, and upon the plain at its top flocks of sheep were fed, and 2 or 3 people boasted they had climbed the second steep. But beyond that, the mountains were all unknown to the dwellers in the valley of Noland. As a matter of fact, no one lived upon them. They were inhabited only by a few small animals and an occasional vulture or eagle which nested in some rugged crag. But at the top of all was an enormous plain that lay far above the clouds, and here the Roly-Rogues dwelt in great numbers. I must describe these Roly-Rogues to you, for they were unlike any other people in the world. Their bodies were as round as a ball. If you can imagine a ball fully 4 feet in thickness at the middle, and their muscles were as tough and elastic as India rubber. They had heads and arms resembling our own, and very short legs, and all these they could withdraw into their ball-like bodies whenever they wished, very much as a turtle withdraws its legs and head into its shell. The Roly-Rogues lived all by themselves in their country among the clouds, and there were thousands and thousands of them. They were quarrelsome by nature, but could seldom hurt one another, because if they fought, they would withdraw their arms and legs and heads into their bodies and roll themselves at one another with much fierceness. But when they collided, they would bounce apart again, and little harm was done. In spite of their savage dispositions, the Roly-Rogues had as yet done no harm to anyone but themselves, as they lived so high above the world that other people knew nothing of their existence, nor did they themselves know, because of the clouds that floated between, of the valleys which lay below them. But, as ill luck would have it, a few days after King Bud's army had defeated the army of Ix, one of the Roly-Rogues, while fighting with another, rolled too near the edge of the plain whereon they dealt, and bounded down the mountainside that faced Noland. Wind had scattered the clouds, so his fellows immediately rolled themselves to the edge and watched the luckless Roly-Rogue fly down the mountain, bounce across the plain, and thence speed down the next mountain. By and by, he became a dot to their eyes, and then a mere speck. But as the clouds had just rolled away for a few moments, the Roly-Rogues could see, by straining their eyes, the city of Nole lying in the valley far below. It seemed, from that distance, merely a toy city, but they knew it must be a big place to show up so far away. And since they had no cities of their own, they became curious to visit the one they had just discovered. The ruler of the Roly-Rogues, who was more quarrelsome than any of the rest, had a talk with his chief men about visiting the unknown city.